There is no going back to the person that I was before Haditha Dam. This was unlike any mission we'd been taught about in Ranger history. We sent 100 guys and they had like a battalion, so we were outnumbered. My chief fear was, am I gonna have the guts to go forward? Am I gonna have that courage? I was a 19-year-old private. What I was truly getting myself into, I had no clue.
The Haditha Dam was essentially a very important strategic point for the invasion of Iraq. It provided one of the only main highways across the Euphrates. It provided hydroelectric power to the western half of Iraq. The initial fear was that the Iraqi army might sabotage the dam and actually flood the entire city of Haditha. This would be disastrous to the people there, but it would also be disastrous to the invasion. The idea was that it would go quite simply. And we would seize this hard point and then hold on to it for about 30 hours. And then by then, the conventional forces would relieve us. And so things just didn't quite go that way.
As you pull up to the dam, I remember seeing it for the first time, and it was just so huge. The structure itself was, I don't know how many stories, but it's in the double digits, I'm sure.
Haditha Dam was about 2 miles long, about 150 feet tall. When we pulled up to the dam, my platoon was tasked with taking a series of buildings on the near side as we approached.
We saw some members of the Iraqi army, which we zip-tied and detained. And we're preparing to take the rest of the hydroelectric facility. You know, we were hoping we could do it quietly.
Didn't even think about the fact that I was shooting until after I fired 4 or 5 rounds, and we'd all stopped shooting because the targets weren't standing any longer. It took probably a good 30 seconds to realize that we just shot somebody. It was one of those things that I always thought about it, going in the infantry, engaging, the enemy is something that you're supposed to look forward to, something I always wondered if I'd have the ability to do. And when it happened, it didn't feel like the way I thought it would feel. I didn't really feel anything. It didn't feel real at the time. It didn't feel any different than training. And then it just, before I really had time to let it all sink in, the battle, kind of just erupted.
All of a sudden, these RPGs are flying up in the air and air bursting over us. We began doing gun runs overhead.
I must have woke up the village and everybody knew that we were there. And this thing became the scariest mission that I'd ever been on in my life.
It felt almost overwhelming at that point because the fire got so accurate.
One of our rangers looked to peek over his position and at that point was hit by the large piece of shrapnel.
Immediately the call for medic came. As we were running, I remember rounds continuing to come in. We'd run, we'd hear the round come in, we'd have to hit the dirt. And we get back up, start running again. When I got there, they had him leaning up against the wall. I'd kind of be expecting something manageable, I wasn't expecting, penetrating head trauma. I felt like I froze. All of a sudden, it was the reality, was. I was scared, like it was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. platoon sergeant saying, you guys got this. I mean, it probably wasn't but 5 or 10 seconds, if that I was frozen. It felt like an eternity. I never wanted to work on one of my buddies,
A guy named Jeremy Felbush. I knew him all right, I knew him pretty well, I think. We partied together a couple times. He was a mortarman. And, like I said, those rounds are effective. And got him right in the forehead.
We just immediately went to work. Felbush was unresponsive and he wasn't breathing. But he had a very strong radial pulse in his wrist. And that indicated to me that, he was very much still alive. I listened for breathing and could hear gurgling, which indicated to me that he had an obstructed airway. And so the platoon medic was prepared to do a tracheotomy. Nobody wants to do that kind of procedure, in such an unsterile and chaotic environment. Luckily, we didn't need to do that. I stuck the suction in his mouth. It was, essentially dry blood and flesh in the back of his throat. And when I was able to clear that blood and flesh out of his throat, he was able to resume breathing on his own. And so we start to load him up, and Jeremy's a big boy. I had him at the shoulders, and a couple of other guys had him at the legs and the hips, and they'd passed him to other guys on the other side of the wall. Things are happening so quickly, and they pulled him from my grasp. I think everyone was at that point, in fear for Jeremy's life. We drove to the center of the dam. I had his head sitting in my lap. I didn't want his head to touch the ground again. It was just this like, almost fear of mine. So I, put his head in my lap. So I had to wait for someone to, replace me.
They brought him in the back of a Humvee that they had converted into a makeshift litter, and they brought him to the center of the control point. It was a lot to take in. And I just remember that look when Matt looked at me, and he was, his mop suit was covered in blood, and, I just remember him handing him over and saying, I know that you guys will do what needs to happen, In the Ranger Regiment, there's this sense that the medics can save just about anybody. If you're still alive and ticking when you get to us, we'll take care of you. And we'll do whatever we need to do, whether it be fly a plane, fly a bird down to come pick you up. We'll make sure that you're treated right, whether dead or alive. And that's something that we all live by. For him to be one of the first guys there to save Felbush's life, be on his first combat mission ever. I mean, you can't rise to the occasion better than that.
He did a good job treating Felbush. And, Felbush is alive, and there's a lot to say for that.
Felbush was able to recover and do quite successfully. He was the first spokesman for the Wounded Warrior Project. I don't think that I would have developed into, the Ranger that I did if it had not been for, Doc Booma's influence.
In a sense, it was like a dad going, man, I helped that guy become what he is. I was proud of him. I'm still proud of him. I'll always be proud of him.
Haditha Dam very much was my coming of age. It taught me that courage is not being fearless, but courage is moving forward in spite of the fear. Fear is something that's overcomable.